Fatima, do you want to put your video on?
I thought we were putting them off. I'm turning it on right now.
Yeah, sorry. Can everyone put their videos on just before I stop broadcasting?
Okay. We're good to go.
That's it. 3, 1, and we're live.
Hello guys, and welcome to the second event in our What the Health is Going On series. This is the Sexual and Gender-Based Violence edition. I am Toyosi Ogundare, a co-founder of the Public Health Hub, and with me is...
I'm Titilaimi Adesonia.
And I'm Mujoya Adebajo, and we are the co-founders of the Public Health Hub.
In case anyone missed our first event, I'm just going to reintroduce the Public Health Hub. So we're a group of health scholars and professionals that have come together to create a platform where Nigerian public health professionals can collaborate. And we've done this because we recognize that there are many different pockets of initiatives, of healthcare initiatives in Nigeria, and in their own efforts, trying to address the same health issues, but they're not collaborating, and this is leading to a lack of impact being seen. So we believe that by pooling resources and by collaborative action, they can actually solve all the health challenges that we face in Nigeria.
So without further ado, we would like to introduce our moderator for this event, Mrs. Abisola Longe, who is a world-renowned coach. She's also a guidance coach, and she's going to be taking over.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi.
And honored moderating this event. I really love the topic, what the health is going on. So we're talking about sexual and gender-based violence. And I'm going to kick off this discussion with a personal story. You know, I spent most of my life in a girls' secondary school in Nigeria. And then I went abroad and spent most of my adult life in England. I was so, battered and wounded by racism that by the time I came back to Nigeria at almost 30, I was really, really grateful, to be coming home. I couldn't stand it. The racism was such a problem. So you can imagine my shock when I got back to Nigeria as an adult and I realized the level of misogyny that I faced as a woman. It was mind-blowing, and it still is. I grew up in a home with a single mother who had 6 girls before a boy. So in my whole world, the fact that I was a woman was really never an issue. And then I get to this adult world and it's remarkable. The level of misogyny and patriarchy in our country is so high that even women are part of the problem without realizing. There's a lot of ignorance from women. I hear all sorts of things. People use feminist as if it's a bad word. My daughter is a feminist on Twitter. And sometimes when I'm reading the abuse she's getting, they insult her, her mother, her father. I now laugh about it, but I didn't used to. So I'm really honored to be doing this. And, without much ado, I'm gonna introduce our wonderful panelists. We have on here today, Dame Julie Oka Donley. We have Dr. Babajide Martins, Dr. Anyeken Makondrola, Mrs. Fatima Kakuri, Ms. Safia Lamti, Mrs. Sarah Odeniran, and Mr. Temidayo Seriki. And we're going to have a really rich discussion. What I'm going to ask you to do, dear panelists, is just tell us your little story, your involvement with SGBV, and then answer the question I'm going to ask you. It's wonderful to have you all here. So we're going to kick off with Dame. Dame, as we call it in Nigeria, is a big madam. She is so accomplished. She's a chartered secretary, a chartered arbitrator. She's the DG of the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, known as NAPTIP in Nigeria. You know, Dame has held so many positions in government. She's done SEC, she's been a company secretary in the capital markets, UBA trustees, she's worked as head of chambers. But her most notable achievement to date, at least in my opinion, is the amazing work she's done with trafficking. She's the author of 3 books, Parenting in the 21st Century, Ending Human Trafficking in Nigeria, and Murky Waters, the story of Nigerian girls who suffered all sorts of exploitation in the hands of human traffickers. I'm sure some of us have seen those gory videos. So well done, Dame. We're really excited to have you here. And we congratulate you because we note that Nigeria has gone up in the tier 2 report of trafficking in persons. So you're welcome, Dame. I'm going to start off by asking you the question, why do you think SGBV gets so little attention? And why has it always been overlooked in Nigeria?
Well, unfortunately, for a very long time, we've had this culture of silence where talking about any form of sexual violence and even domestic violence for that matter is considered to be a taboo. You go to weddings and I am always so disgusted when the chairman of the occasion tells the couple never to discuss their problems with a third party. And so this woman, you know, right from when she's going into her husband's house, she has people she looks up to counseling her and telling her that if her husband is beating her to a state of death, or if anything like that is happening, she should not share it with a third party. That's a very, very wrong advice. So you see, we need to change the narratives. We need to change our mindset. And that is why people just grew up with this culture of silence, bottling things up like rape, sexual and gender-based abuses, and it just continued. But thankfully, because of the social media, people are now becoming more enlightened, more aware, people are more educated, and they are now able to come out to share without being, you know, without fear of stigmatization, you know, so it has really, you know, so those are the factors. Then we have even now parents who, you know, pay too much attention on their sons, you know, and they think that, you know, all the house chores should be done by the girl. And the mother is quick to say, are you not a girl? Are you not a girl? You know, so when you start making your brothers to think that he's superior to his sisters, you know, he grows up to be a potential, you know, a wife beater or even a rapist for that matter. You know, so the parental negligence and too much attention on the boy child is also a serious factor. Sex education should start from the home. The mothers are so shy to talk about sex with their children. And I keep telling them, if you cannot talk to your children about sex, someone else would have sex with your children and teach them sex. So you need to prevent this from happening. You know, so these are mainly the factors, you know, that have made this rape thing, you know, become, you know, a lot of rapists are just getting away with murder. And this was what led us to set up the sexual offenders register, you know, so we can name and shame people like that. So it gives the victims a sense of justice, knowing that at least something is done and they get some form of justice.
Thank you so much. And we thank you for that register. You know, do you think tradition and religion has a role to play in this, Sarah? Sarah is the clinical services specialist of Deep K Tyagi Foundation. And she's a certified nurse who's worked at, you know, University of Ibadan. She's also been a matron at the Pastor Bimbo Dukoya Foundation. So Sarah, tell us, I mean, you're a devout Christian, you're married with 2 boys, you're a family planning provider. Tell us from your own point of view, do you think tradition and religion has a role to play in what Dame has spoken about? Sarah, we can't hear you. Please unmute.
Okay, am I good to go? Hello, good
Yeah.
afternoon.
It looks like Sarah's frozen. Sarah, can you hear us? Okay, I'll pass that question to you, Sophia. Sophia, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can hear you.
Hello.
Okay, yes, Suzanne has actually said the most challenging we
Sophia
are
is
facing
a sexual health
Can you
nurse
hear me?
at the Central Middlesex Hospital in London, and she's studying to be a midwife. She's working currently at the Royal Free London Foundation. Royal Free is one of my favorite hospitals. You're welcome, Sophia. I'd like you to answer that question. I know you're currently not in Nigeria, but do you think religion has something to do with this?
I do feel like it has a lot to do with it. I think growing up myself in the church, it was badgered into me that, no sex before marriage, no sex at all until you are married. I wasn't really spoken to as a young woman or as a young child about sex and things that can happen, implications, tradition, definitely. I was made to call many people who weren't actually related to me uncle and auntie. And if you didn't, you were penalized for it. And that, I find, does open up a door for, people who are not related to you to actually be given that chance to abuse you in a sexual way, even mentally, physically, verbally, just in different ways they can abuse you. And not, I know we're talking about sex right now, sexual abuse at the moment, but just so many different levels of abuse can come from traditionally being taught to respect this person as your uncle or your auntie, or and these are not necessarily people who that you can trust. These are sometimes people who your parents are friends with for a limited amount of time, and then all of a sudden, they're not friends with them anymore, and you still have to in some way respect them, but then that still leaves that door open. So it is dangerous. With religion, I'm still a Christian. I still believe solely in God, but I think there is a different way or a different route that could be taken in introducing and incorporating religion and sexual health and sexual education into that. I think, I'm not sure how it would be implemented, if I'm honest, but I think it's very important to do so. With my young daughter, she's 7 years old. My mum, it skipped a generation, but she didn't really talk to me about sex and protecting myself, but she's very keen on teaching her grandchildren. She has 4 grandchildren. She's teaching both of the young 7-year-olds, if a man touches you here, this is what you need to do. There's no need to be afraid, and she's already spoken to me about making sure that I speak to her and educate her in the right ways and what not to do and who not to be around, and do not let her call this person uncle because it can put you in a bad place, and do not let her call this person auntie because that can also put her in the wrong place. So it's like it can have some bad implications, but it can also have some good implications, I'm sure, because there are people out there who aren't necessarily related to you who you will call auntie and uncle, and they can protect you. But then on the flip side, you still have you still have bad and good, no matter how you look at it. But yeah, I think some things need to be changed and things need to be incorporated in order for us to protect young women and men, because it happens to both.
That's fantastic. That's really fantastic. That's so deep. I mean, for many people in my generation, when you started, I thought, what's wrong with calling people auntie and uncle? In fact, we say mommy and daddy.
Yeah.
They are not just uncle and auntie. So yeah, we say mommy and daddy. But you're so right. Yeah. That is so true and worth looking at. We'll hopefully come back to that because that is really deep. I'm delighted to welcome Temidayo on the panel. Temidayo was born in Lagos and went to school in Lagos and then went to university in Kiel and decided to come back to Nigeria to settle. Temidayo started a platform called Man Up Initiative to reach men with the aim of challenging and changing their values. He's also a co-founder of the Vision Group, a youth empowerment initiative that gives young people a sense of direction in their career and entrepreneurship aspirations. That's so needed. Temidayo is a strong advocate on topics like mental health, gender-based violence, and masculinity. Man up. Temidayo, you're welcome. How do we, do you think SGBV only applies to females? And, if not, why do you think it's not a woman-only issue?
I mean, okay, so my easy answer to that question would just be no. It's definitely not something that applies to only women. I think it's sexual gender-based violence is something that has to be treated on a case-by-case basis, but the important thing to note is, the general statistics show that it happens to women a lot more than it happens to men, which is why people tend to see it as a woman's issue, and then also kind of just dumb down or kind of dial down on when it happens to men. And then there's also, the other angle of it, like from in a country like Nigeria, from my experience, you find that the largely patriarchal society that we live in has, and maybe also coupled with a few things like maybe toxic masculinity and such, has made it extremely difficult for guys and men to come out when things like this happen to them. So you find that there are a lot of men actually who have been through all sorts of gender-based violence, maybe as kids. You hear many cases. I mean, we do at Man Up, we do something called Safe Space. And I mean, you hear of a few cases of guys who were, molested and raped by aunties, like you said, rightly, Sophia, by quote unquote aunties and uncles when they were kids, or friends, or people that used to bully them in school, but you tend not to talk about it because of the patriarchal society that we're brought up in. The idea that, like the same way Mrs. Dame rightly said earlier, that, growing up as kids, you're told the girls should do all the chores, and then the boys are kind of left, and then you're told things like boys don't cry, man up, all those kinds of things that form, those, what I like to say, toxic views in the minds of guys. It stops you from expressing yourself. It stops you from tapping into vulnerability, which, at Man Up, we always say is a large part of humanity. And without that vulnerability, you're unable to come out and discuss some of these things. So it's definitely not an issue that just pertains to women. It definitely does happen to men as well. But I think it's also important, with all that being said, that in order for us to actually end this, we have to deal with it where it's happening the most, and that is with women. And that's where men need to step up and have that discussion and stand in the gap for women where it's necessary.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you said that, and I'd like you to comment a bit later on this notion that men use to rebut the whole gender-based violence towards women. A supposed friend messaged me the other day with a nasty picture equating rape to prostitution. And, he didn't understand why I was so incensed, and there's this, this all lives matter kind of attitude with gender-based violence. So men suffer rape. So I'd like you to educate us a bit later about how we take on board men's issues with gender-based violence, as well as not minimize the trauma of rape. But I'll move quickly to Sarah. I introduced Sarah earlier, but we didn't get volume. Sarah is the most beautiful matron I've ever come across in my life. We have that stereotype of matrons, and she's a nurse. And Sarah, how do we address and dissolve this current stigma attached to SGBV?
Okay, can you hear me now, everyone? Okay, thank you. So I would have loved to address it from what I was saying earlier on, because before my audio actually went off. The thing about is that we need to break into the jinx of the stigma. People need to realize that they have they actually have a voice and their voice can be heard. So from there, if people have not yet identified their voices, it will be difficult to tackle it. Okay, for example, in the church, there was actually a case that actually happened in the children's church, whereby an 8-year-old boy was actually molesting the girls of his age. Yes, it happened right in a particular assembly in my church. And all lo and behold, the pastor came and said, no, we want it to be, you know, to be swept under the carpet. We don't want it to escalate. We don't want the mother to feel bad. Even the mother was saying, no, God forbid, my son cannot do that. And everything. And the mother of the child that was actually molested wants to speak up. She's educated. She was like, no, this must stop. What if it's, and when they probed further, they noticed he was always actually doing the same thing in school. You understand? Thank God for the mother of the girl that actually spoke up. You understand? So if people are here to identify their voices, there's no way we can tackle it. And when we bring cases up, even women that are actually sexually assaulted by these people, they will tell you, even if the case is ongoing, they will say, no, I want to forgive. I don't want people to actually, I want to just drop the case. I want to do, no. We need to bring people to justice to save other people. So many things are going on out there. And if people are not speaking up, there is no how we can actually tackle it. So if from, I want to just say, even from the nursery, if we start imbibing this knowledge into them, speak up. That is what they will actually, you know, it will be in them till they get to primary, secondary, and when they grow up. I'm sorry to say, our cultural background is not actually helping matters, even in the country. We noticed when they wanted to pass the bill into law, I'm sorry to say, some people in the Senate said, no, we shouldn't pass that law. Please, what's stopping them from castrating men? I'm sorry to say. And even if a woman is actually assaulting boys, I'm sorry to say, one of my close relatives confided in me, is a boy, that he was molested by a nurse. I felt so ashamed. He said when he was going to the hospital, when he was much younger, if he's running temperature, the particular nurse will always want to attend to him. It will take him to the bedroom to tap his sponge him, and over there, it will be touching his private part. I'm like, wow, so this is actually dipping in even into our profession too, and other cadres of life. So to tackle this issue, people need to speak up. People need to speak out because their voices can be heard. And without the fear of stigmatization, I think this will help us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's so true. And that's something that we really will go deeper into. And like you said, because, you know, of this shame culture and not having a voice, the thing goes to higher levels. And Dr. Aniekon deals with many of those higher levels. Dr. Aniekon is a graduate of the College of Medicine, and she joined WARIF from the beginning. And she's going to tell us a bit about WARIF. And she has forensic medical examination training in gender-based violence. And I'm sure we don't want to hear some of the things she's seen. She's currently the center manager at WARIF. Dr. Aniekon, you're welcome. What services do you provide for rape, sexual assault victims? Who is entitled to the services? Are they free? What do you provide for survivors? Counseling? At what cost? For how long? Please tell us a bit about the work you do.
Thank you for having me. I just want to appreciate the panelists, and they've said quite a lot. And as she rightly said, that's the nurse. We've seen a couple of clients come to our center, and the WARIF Center is a one-stop facility that was created by Dr. Kemi Da Silva. She's a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist that decided to create this center on account of the number of cases she has seen during her practice as a consultant. And as you rightly said, I started the organization at the inception, and I have to confess that I have seen a couple of cases that have been very traumatic, and this has even established the reason why we should have places like this where survivors and their family can come and get help. So at the WARIF Center, we created a one-stop facility where survivors can have access to all the services that they require in that facility. And we also guarantee that confidentiality and privacy is assured. Because as we've noticed that a lot of survivors are worried about their story going out there, people hearing about their stories, the fear of stigmatization, and even intimidation by the public, and even the perpetrators and their family. And we always assure them that these services that they have been given is under close confidentiality and privacy. And we offer what the medical services, where we offer them treatment, because a lot of these survivors come at the acute phase where it happened, and a lot of them are weak, a lot of them have injuries that need to be attended to, and we have to provide these services for them to prevent infection and to prevent pregnancy. So we always, as we talk when we have platforms like this, to encourage the public that when cases of rape occur, that they should make it to the center as early as possible. Of course, the initial response is to hide out, is to clean up yourself, is to keep the clothes, take off the clothes, but we always encourage that this acute phase, when it happens, is very, very crucial in getting and collecting samples, in getting evidence, and in providing the necessary treatment that these survivors need to prevent sexually transmitted infection and to prevent pregnancy. So we also carry out forensic examination, because we all agree that rape is a crime and the perpetrators need to be prosecuted. And so we carry out forensic examination where we collect samples, where we document injuries, and this is further handed over to agencies that will help us in prosecuting these perpetrators rather. And also it is admissible in court. And we carry out laboratory services. Of course, I talked about the sexually transmitted infection, and we have to carry out this sexually transmitted infection screening like HIV, hepatitis B and C, syphilis, and of course, pregnancy tests. And we have psychosocial counseling, which is very, very important. We've heard about survivors that have suffered depression, that have suffered short and long-term complications as a result of this traumatic service ordeal. And so we've always stressed the fact that survivors should come for counseling, and we carry out these sessions at the initial time they present, and through the course of their follow-up, we have the follow-up counseling where the counselor sees them at different intervals and talk to them and follow up their progress. And of course, we don't just restrict it to the survivors alone. We talk to their family members, because you have to agree with me that both the survivors and the family members are affected by this ordeal. You can imagine a mother just finding out that her 8-year-old daughter was raped. It's traumatic. It's life-shattering for both the parents and both the survivors. And so we take that opportunity not just to counsel the survivors, but to counsel the family members on how they can support the survivor in our road to recovery. And we also use that opportunity to educate the family members, because we have a lot of them coming in and blaming the survivor. Oh, she should have spoken out immediately it happened. She should not have gone to his room. You know, she should have talked immediately. He told her not to tell anybody. She should have come to meet her. I know you hear stuff like that, and you can imagine the survivor going home to hear those kind of blame and accusations. And so we always take the opportunity to educate these family members as well on how to help the survivors. And we still, most importantly, always encourage them to speak out, to report these cases to the police, because you hear them talk about, oh, the perpetrator is a family member, they just want to settle it in house, they don't want to take it out there, they don't want to air their dirty laundry in public. But you're giving power to this perpetrator. You are still making this survivor see this perpetrator, and that way she won't recover. Imagine being in the same house with someone who has raped you, and you feel that is okay. It's not. It doesn't help the survivor in recovering from this ordeal. And it even exposes her to more cases of assault. If the perpetrator feels he can get away with an episode, of course, the chances is that he might still carry out this assault, and with even greater impunity, and even take it further by assaulting other children or other females around him, because he feels nobody can even do anything to him, or it's just about pleading and begging, let's not talk about it. Understand? So we use that opportunity to educate the families as well on and encourage them to report these cases. It helps the perpetrator. Yes.
So your services, how affordable are they?
Oh, our services are free. Everything we do in Warri is free. So we tell that to the survivors and their parents when they come, that every services we carry out. And these are made possible by donations from individuals, from international and local donor organizations. Yes. So we are able to carry out these services effectively for our survivors. Yes.
Well done on the great job. I have a question that we probably should have answered at the beginning. I'm going to direct this to Dane, since she has to leave us soon. Dr. Babajide, I'm coming to you. Don't worry. But Dane, our audience want to know what SGBV even means. You know, what is sexual and gender-based violence? And, you know, I'd like you to answer that and also tell us a bit about the VAP Act, this very important act we're all talking about. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the sexual and gender-based violence, SGBV, refers to any act that is perpetrated against a person's will and is based on gender norms and on equal power relationships. It includes physical, emotional or psychological and sexual violence, and denial of resources or access to services. Violence includes threats of violence and coercion. SGBV inflicts harms on women, girls, men, and boys, and is a severe violation of several human rights. Rape is also a sexual and gender-based violence, and it is described basically as a form of penetrative sexual acts with a person without the other person's consent. But what is good about the VAP Act is that whereas in other legislations, nobody ever imagined that a man could be raped. So now the VAP Act has made provisions for also boys, for the possibility that boys can be raped. And that is very, very important. And it has gone beyond just penetration by using the male genitalia. So Section 1 of the VAP Act 2015 states that a person is said to have committed rape if he or she penetrates the vagina, anus, or mouth of another person with any part of his or her body or anything else, and without the consent of the other person. You know, this is fantastic because now you can commit rape by using any form of object. So there's no excuse to say, well, I didn't penetrate the man or the woman, or I didn't use my organs, I used a pencil or a biro or whatever. So this is really good. And that is why it's very important for all the states to domesticate this VAP Act in whole, not in part. And the reason why I would have even preferred a situation where the VAP Act is a federal law, just like the Trafficking in Persons Act, is because if a state is to domesticate the act, they may take some part of it out, you know, to suit their state. So at the end of the day, the law is not going to be of general application. And, you know, whereas some people may decide that, okay, Osun State, for example, I'm just giving it as an example. So the perpetrator may think, okay, if I commit this crime in Osun State, they are more liberal as against committing this crime in Lagos State. So the perpetrator now moves to Osun State because he thinks that, you know, as a rapist, he has better chances of getting away with murder. So, you know, these are just a few of my observations, my personal observations though, yeah.
Yeah, or even worse, the rapist doesn't even have to move, as we've seen with the northern states. There's just a lot more of these barbaric acts taking place there because there's no law. And that brings us to the legal luminary. Dr. Babajide is a trained child justice administrator. He's a graduate of the Nigerian Bar. He's a solicitor of the Supreme Court of England and Wales. He has a PhD in constitutional law. He's director of the Lagos State Office of the Public Defender. He's a real seasoned lawyer, Dr. Babajide. You're most welcome. And you know, this is the timely point for you to come in here. We're talking about law and we're talking about the VAP Act. And like Dame said, do these laws really protect individuals, you know, against all these, you know, forms of violence? And do they cover denial of resources and basic necessities to the victims? Please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you for the invitation. I think the law is very, very dynamic, just like what Dame have said. The VAP Act has gone a further mile into sort of encapsulating the new species of offenses. You know, for me, the most important part of that act is the need for compensation to be paid for victims of crime, victims of the law, and also punishment for female genital mutilation as well. Those are very, very innovative part of the law that is commendable. But what we have in Lagos State is that we also, apart from having a robust law, we have a local team of experts, which is referred to as domestic violence and sexual response team. This is a driving body that has various professionals that deals with the issue of domestic and gender-based violence. So you have medical doctors, you have teachers, you have people from the Ministry of Justice, you have people from Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, you have people from youth and social development, because obviously victims of domestic and sexual violence often need to be rescued. At times there is need for school to change for the children who have been abused, or for the women who have been abused. They need economic empowerment. This is where the role of the Ministry for Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation comes in. They work with NGO, and also the state government have put resources at their disposal to assist women who are victims of domestic violence with accommodation, capacity training to be able to carry on. And most of the statistics have shown that many people who are victims are not able to walk away because they rely on the abuser, and because they haven't got their own stay within the abuser. And research has also shown that many abusers don't even want their spouses to work, because they know once they have economic independence, they will be able to reach out to people, they will be able to rid themselves of domestic violence. So it's very, very important to do that. I think what is also very important from my own point of view is that I knew recently we attended a stakeholder meeting, which was invited by the First Lady of Lagos State. And at that meeting, you know, the First Lady reiterates the need for all agencies that are involved in enforcement of law to intensify efforts to, you know, to curb the scourge of rape in our society. And why is very, very important, this is an initiative that is also supported by all the Association of the First Ladies. So it would go a long way to be able to, you know, domesticate the VAP Act, which Dame has referred to. So this is a very, very good initiative by the First Lady. I think for myself as a former public prosecutor, the need to enforce the law more rigorously is very, very important. It's not just enough to have laws. Of course, there's raft of law in various states, but it's the enforceability of those laws that need to be intensified. When laws are there and when there are linkages, then people will be able to get away from the auspices of the law. Just like what they mentioned, people will move from one state to the other regime, which would give them an opportunity to privation, like you mentioned, is also part of domestic violence. And there are laws in our state that punish them separately. So what the state has done, which gives a unique position, is that in Lagos State, we have the protection from domestic violence law as far back as 2007. And I need to say that Lagos State is the first state in Nigeria that has taken the initiative to protect women and children from domestic violence. You see, why this is very, very important is that without necessarily taking the perpetrator to court to go and prosecute them, you can apply for an injunction or interim protection order. And if the perpetrator breached that interim protection order, he or she is liable to imprisonment for 5 years. So this is the importance of this law. So you are not particularly concerned about putting the criminal litigation, criminal prosecution through the court, because many a times the women will chicken out, so to say. Chicken out in the sense that, like I alluded to earlier, that they don't want to send the breadwinner of the family to jail, because they haven't got enough economic power to be able to sustain their family commitment. Why this law is also very important is this. The law is also important because it has liberalized people who can make application under that law for a protection order against a perpetrator. So you can have church cleric, social worker, nurses, police officers, and other members of the society who are particularly concerned about the welfare of a person who is suffering from domestic violence. And this is why this law is very, very good. At times, you might not even need the victim or the survivor to come and give evidence in court. For example, if one of the conditions is that do not go to the address of the petitioner, or do not go to a place of work. So if I'm an officer of the law and I see that person go to that particular place that is injuncted not to go, I can sue an affidavit and bring it before court and say, look, I'm aware that this person is under protection not to go to a particular address, and I've seen him at that address in breach of the interim protection order. So this is why this is very, very important. Just to reiterate. But what we do, what we do as Office of Public Defender is that we are involved in rescuing, victims or survivors of domestic violence, both children and adults. And I'm glad to see Dr. Aneka, who I haven't met until now. I've seen some report that emanated from WARIF. So what the state is also doing is that to have a lot of sexual referral center. So there's sexual referral center at LASUT, and also all the primary health care centers in all the 57 LCDA, local community development areas. We have primary health care centers, because most of the time, the victims don't have money. Yes, ma'am.
That's wonderful, Dr. Babaji. And to be honest, we're really, those of us who watch this closely are really impressed with what Lagos State in particular is doing. However, you said, you used a word, an officer of the law. So who is enforcing these things? Our same Nigerian police? I'm going to let Dame talk about this because this is a major issue. But before I call Dame, I'm going to quickly get Fatima to come in here because we haven't met her. Mrs. Fatima Kakuri is a special advisor to government. She is currently special advisor to the Speaker, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. She's advises on gender and social development. She's had extremely, intensive training in public policy. So she has the ears of government, as we say. So Fatima, before I let Dame come in and go, my biggest concern from what Dr. Babajide is saying is, how do we ensure, first of all, these laws, like Dame said, are nationwide? We know Lagos State is doing a great job, but how do we ensure that this is national? And then how do we sort out implementation? God forbid if I had an incident, I'm not sure I would go to the Nigerian police. So please.
Thank you for having me. That is a great channel of discussion for us.
Fatima, we can't hear you. Please speak up a bit. And Dame, please wait for us.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
A bit more volume.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for the audio. I was just saying, I'm very impressed that we can have this platform to discuss, and a lot of women are beginning to champion these discussions to create some level of destigmatization in society for us. At our office, one of the first things that we identified as a work plan immediately the speaker emerged, the leader of that office, was to see how we could identify some of the laws that could promote greater gender equality and inscribe it as a greater discussion in the chambers of the House of Representatives. One of the things that we did immediately we assumed office was to find out, just do a mapping of some of the states that hadn't domesticated the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act and the Child Rights Act. And we had consultative meetings with civil society organizations just to kind of feel the tempo and the pulse of what challenges they've had with engaging subnational levels and how we could come in to create advocacy at that point. Because at the National Assembly's level, all we had to do was actually pass that law and then see how, we could oversight implementation. But, we are not able to achieve that unless we are able to get the state to domesticate the act. And with, the current trend of our conservative social construct, there's really been a lot of misrepresentation of most of our gender policies whenever it comes to engaging some of the regions of the country, especially, in the north and surprisingly in some areas in the southeast. So most of the northern states have taken a position based on their cultural values and religious values to say that, to continue to perpetuate actually their ideas of what they feel was interpreted for them as, religious and cultural, guiding policies or laws for them as it were. There's been a lot of advocacy done even before the emergence of the speaker for the gender equality bill, and we had similar reactions to some of these bills. So what we decided to do now is to become more proactive about advocacy, because it's not enough just to have, speakers of the House of or state assemblies converge on a meeting with the speaker to discuss some of their challenges and their milestones. What we did was to probe deeper and hone into some of the issues that they had with the bills, with the acts, to find out where we could come in to help them with amendments and technical support. A lot of what we were hearing was that a lot of them didn't really understand what constituted the acts. And so after that, because of how far the Bauchi state had gone, the speaker assigned the state speaker of the Bauchi legislature, who incidentally happens also to be the chairman of all the Northeast speakers, to advocate for the passage of the VAC Act, since he had already gone ahead at the level, at that point, it was at the public hearing stage, which is the third stage before the final reading. And as of last week, I can tell you that it had already been passed at the Bauchi State of Assembly. So he would in turn now go back to go and start advocating. But it's just one thing to say that, and it's another thing to create a work plan around that. So what we've done now is to drill down and create partnerships with INGOs who are ready to kind of handhold them through the process with CSOs and work with them in a technical capacity to help them understand it and make sure that they are sensitized on some of the provisions of the law and see that there is no direct conflict with what the provisions have stated, and their own penal codes and criminal codes have been operational before now. Another thing that the speaker has decided to do is to create a sensitization campaign for state actors who are in charge, who have the mandate for responding to most of the SGBV issues that we have, because you don't even want to know how many petitions we receive on a daily basis for very gory issues that we actually don't have the power to implement or do anything about. And we are actually tongue-tied when we are not able, when the law is not admissible in the states that have been identified. So for the most part, what we've done again is to see how we can create a partnership to move forward with the discussion on, you know, how to sensitize state actors on what their roles, like the police force, the judiciary, NAPTIP, and I'm very happy that Dr. Julie is here because she's been very
I think you're really doing a great job and very proactive, and I like the advocacy angle. And we'd like to see, after this discussion, we'd like to see you and Dr. Anyekan, Julie, really getting together, and let's really push this advocacy angle. I'm sure Dr. Anyekan will be in touch with you. I know my friend runs WARIF, and I'm going to call her and say, you guys need to get together and get things going. Sorry, I had to interrupt you a little bit there, but Dame has to discuss, and I really want to hear what Dame has to say about how we really get this implementation, you know, going. And also, before you leave, please just tell us a little bit about NAPTIP. But how do we get these laws implemented? You know, I love one of the questions that have come up. Low number of rape cases being reported. How do we get these cases reported and convicted? What's your view, ma'am?
Yeah, thank you very much. But I don't mind staying with you all the way because this is really very engaging, and I'm like, I'm very glad to hear that. Thank you. Yeah, you see, on the issue of implementation, I must tell you that, you see, even before the VAP Act 2015 came on board, there are laws in all the states. There are laws. The problem has been implementation of those laws. I'll just give you a quick example. There is need for all stakeholders to meet seriously with the judiciary, because at the end of the day, the judge has the final say. I'll just give you a quick example. For example, in the Trafficking in Persons Act, the new law says the minimum you can give to a trafficker is 5 years, right? Plus imposition of a fine. Now we are getting convictions where the judge, despite the fact that we're not even happy with the 5 years minimum, we are getting convictions where the judge is giving 2 years or fine. So, I mean, it's quite frustrating. It's really, really frustrating. I mean, the laws are there, but at the end of the day, it's up to the judges, you know, to implement. Yeah, the judges make up use their discretion in passing sentences. I just got a conviction a few days ago, where for someone who trafficked some girls, they said because she was a first-time offender. There's nothing like first-time offender in trafficking, and she was given a 1 year or fine of 150,000, 125,000. So you see, there is need for us to engage with the judiciary seriously, so that these laws that are already in place at least can be implemented. Let's start from there before we start talking about making amendments, you know, for more stringent punishment and all of that. Now, NAPTIP is the federal government of Nigeria's response to human trafficking. It was established in 2003 as a result of the very high rates of trafficking. At that time, it was very common in Italy, Spain, in Europe actually, but especially in Italy. There were lots of reported cases of Nigerian girls who were trafficked. Unfortunately, at the time, a lot of Nigerians themselves did not even understand that these girls were into forced prostitution, but they saw them as prostitutes and stigmatized them, not realizing that these girls actually needed help because they were being forced. There were people that were controlling them, everything about them. They had made these girls to swear oaths, and these girls actually believed that if they walked away, they would die. They had taken naked pictures of these girls and they were blackmailing them. If you attempt to run away, or these things were really going on, but lots of people didn't understand. But thankfully, a lot of people are beginning to understand now. You see, NAPTIP is a law enforcement agency as well as a...
We're losing you a bit. Please say that again. Hello? I don't know if it's my internet or yours. Okay. We're losing Dame. I'm going to have to come back to you, Dame. We're losing you a bit, and you've promised to stay with us. So I'm going to come back to you. So this issue of implementation, what are we going to do, Mrs. Sarah? What do we do? Implementation.
In the sense that we have powers to arrest, to rescue, and your internet, because I'm wow.
Okay, she's back. You're back, Dame. Can you hear me? No. Okay, let's go to Mrs. Sarah quickly. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. Please unmute.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So in implementing this, once this, I would call them survivors or victims are actually identified, we need to take a step further. That's why in the medical line, we just don't leave them in the hands of the law enforcement agent. There's some things that needs actually to be done before we actually leave them in their hands. As Mrs. Dame rightly said, Dr. Dame rightly said anyway, she said most of this law enforcement agents, are they actually doing what they're supposed to do? There was a case actually referred to the police station of the Sexual Assault Referral Center in Oshodi. And the woman I met there, I will actually make anonymous, I won't actually announce her name. She actually took the case up on a good note, but on the long run, I noticed she paired with the husband of my victim. And they started conversing together. I was wondering what the problem was. And later she said, oh, Madam Sarah, you know what we can actually do? They can settle it amicably. Yes, we shouldn't allow it to get out of hand. And I'm like, sorry, where am I in the first place? This is actually a center actually brought a patient. She said, yes, that the husband has apologized. And the husband happens to be a tailor. And at the long run, I actually wanted to probe further. She gave the man clothes to sew for her. And I'm like, we are not there yet. We are not there yet. If the government have put some things in place and now it's getting to the user end where we need to get justice and we need people to help us, and this is happening, then I felt embarrassed. Though the woman at the end of the day actually transferred the case, because we do referrals too. We actually refer. So I had to refer. Well, in Pastor Bimbo Dukoya, what they do is Dr. Aneka, Dr. made mention of something that, yes, they need, this victim needs, that is what they actually do. Can you please hear me? Can you hear me?
Well, we're losing you.
Hello?
We're losing you. Just
hello, can you hear me now?
Summarize that. We're losing you. The victim, you were saying, just finish that. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. Okay. So, Dr. Babajide made mention of something of accommodating, and other things that, yes, is a good start for implementing that. Once they come, we just don't leave them. We need to take them out of danger to evacuate these victims from their abusers. note, I'm not only talking about women now. Men are also involved because we're talking about the gender-based violence, not just women alone in this aspect. We evacuate them. And Dr. Pasokbo Dukoya, we have a shelter home for these women or even men that they actually need help. Then from there, we as a nurse, we step in to provide psychological support for them. There's some people whereby we actually refer to EPIN centers, EPIN clinics, rape cases. We refer them to EPIN center whereby they can get the post-exposure prophylaxis, which is actually free. We refer them, which is actually free. Then also, as a family planning provider for rape victims, we give them emergency contraceptive. We don't want them to get pregnant. We don't want to hear stories that touch the heart after 1 month or two, because that is actually traumatic. So those are the two things we need in order to implement this. So the victim will know that, yes, I'm not just alone in this. They are all out to help me. Not just that I want to seek I want to seek the legal justice for her. Our health matters to me. Our psychological well-being is of key. They go through constant counseling on a regular basis. So that's what we do for them in implementing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that leads me to a question I have for Dr. Onyeka. One of our attendees says, that's amazing work you're doing, but how often are these rape kits held up in court? We want to know what the incidence of SGBV is in Nigeria. I wonder if we have good statistics, and how often, how seriously the government is taking it. In Warif, what have you seen? Have you seen progress nationally, and how often are these rape kits that Mrs. Sarah talked about actually held up in court? You're muted. Please unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so we always encourage survivors to come in on time within the 72 hours when the incident occurred. This being that when they come in at that time, they are able to collect samples that we can use and for DNA analysis. And thankfully, the Lagos State now has its DNA and forensic laboratory where we can collect these samples. And we actually have rape kits that were donated by the Lagos State DDS Reality, that's the domestic arm of Lagos State. So we are able to collect these samples where we take to the lab for DNA analysis. And that's why I stress the fact that it's important that survivors come in immediately after the assault. And most importantly, do not discard any materials or clothing that might even help in us collecting evidences. And even
give us an idea of the percentage of the evidence you've collected that have resulted in success.
So far, we don't have any incidents or any percentages that have been successful with a DNA analysis. So we've been working on that aspect, and we are looking at going forward using DNA analysis in convicting these suspects when the survivors come and when we collect the samples and submit to the DNA forensic lab. So we are looking more.
But doctor, if someone has been raped, the first thing they want to do is have a wash, take off the clothes. You've told us not to do that. They should come to the center. But the question we want to know is, this coming to the center and not having a wash and giving you this evidence, what has it achieved to date?
Yes, like I said, since now we have a forensic lab in Lagos State, with them coming to the center, not discarding any form of any of the samples or the evidences, we can now take it to the lab where it can be analyzed. And on the end, with the law enforcement, the perpetrators too, their samples are collected, where this their DNA are too analyzed and compared. And this is taken to court where they can be convicted based on the results that are gotten from that. And we are starting to see cases because we've already started implementing this. We have the rape case in our facility now. So we are able to collect samples and take to the forensic lab.
Okay, great. Temidayo, I have a question for you from the audience. For the protection against the domestic violence law, are men included for all-round inclusivity? Dame has already answered that. But the participant wants to know, because men experience domestic violence as well, what is being done for men? And I'm going to also ask you to answer the question, what role can men play to prevent SGBV? We've seen that advocacy is probably going to do more than the law at this point.
Yeah.
What's the role of men here, Temidayo?
Okay, so I'll just take it one at a time. So I feel, again, to answer it just short and simple, not enough is being done for men in this space. I mean, as Mrs. Dame rightly said, there is now an inclusivity of men in the law, saying that, okay, men can actually be victims of rape, and that is something that is coming in 2020. I feel like not enough is being done in bringing it to light, the reality of what goes on in men, especially at a younger age. But for me, especially, at Man Up, what we do, what we're working on, what we're trying to do is ingrain these kinds of conversations into the educational system, so that not just the students, but parents also are aware that these things happen and are aware of the importance of allowing men to, again, tap into that important part of humanity, which is vulnerability. Because without it, it's impossible for you to share. So we've designed a curriculum of sorts for schools, like a life skills curriculum for boys, and that just essentially, the aim of that is just to kind of ingrain some of the values that we believe at Man Up into those young boys from a young age. Because what that does is it then helps you to understand that, okay, it's not abnormal for me to feel like this. It's not abnormal for this to happen to me, on the topic of sexual-based violence. It's not abnormal for it to happen to me as a man. I'm not any less of a man if it happens. It's not tied to my masculinity if it happens. And it's fine for me to talk about it, things like that. Along with a lot of other things. So I would say, though, that not a lot is being done. Even when I remember when I moved back, I was at a point in my life where I needed guidance as a man in just discovering my identity generally. And there wasn't really anything for me, but there were so many things to help women. And obviously that's amazing. But it's kind of formed a neglect, for boys, for the boy child, for men, and for, just masculine males in general. So I would say that a lot more needs to be done. A lot more work needs to be done, because, even at Man Up, a lot of times you do events and stuff, and it's mostly women that come, whereas it's actually targeted for men. And, it usually will end up saying, okay, the men that are here, take notes, but most of you that are here who are women, take notes so you can talk to the men in your life. But it's not the same. It's better for you to hear these things firsthand. And what we need to do as men, just to tie it into the second question, what we need to do as men is to help each other to understand that these things are not in any way tied to masculinity. There's, especially in a highly patriarchal country like Nigeria, there's a lot of misconceptions of what masculinity is. That's why, again, people can tell you boys don't cry, whereas no, human beings cry, not that boys don't cry. And it's those kinds of ideas and those kinds of thoughts processes that we're trying to drain into the minds of young men today, so that the man of tomorrow is better than the man of today. Do you get what I mean? So another thing we can do as men, one thing we always preach, especially on the topic of rape and gender-based violence, is accountability. Not enough men are held accountable for their actions, and that goes down to every sector and every facet of life, especially in Nigeria. Even if you look at politicians, a lot of the lawmakers, none of them are held accountable, and that just comes down to the grassroots as well. As a man, when I do things, a lot of my friends, me personally, I've consciously surrounded myself with people who keep me accountable, from my girlfriend to my best friend, things like that. I have people constantly asking me why I'm doing things, not in a hateful way or not in a spiteful way, but from a place of love. And these are the kind of values that we as men need to push to each other. Like the idea that it's okay for me as a man to ask my friend, how is your mental health? And it's okay for me as a man to to cry in front of my male friends. But you even find now that it's getting better, I would say, though. It's getting better, but you do find that a lot of guys are more comfortable being vulnerable to their female friends or their female relatives as opposed to, males. And those are the kind of things that we're trying to break. Those are the kind of narratives that we're trying to change. And that's what I feel like men can do to help each other. Because again, one thing we always say is if men don't spark this change and start this change and take the forefront, it's very unlikely for anything to change. We have to use the privilege that we have as men to make the change.
Very true. But you see, the issue with men not coming up and making the change, the issue with a lack of a low reporting of rape and domestic violence, all circles around this huge culture of shame and silence. And Safiya, I'd like to hear your view on what we can do about this. So many times in my life, people have tried to shame me into silence. As a woman, you should be seen, not heard. When you're assertive, you're a bitch, and so on and so forth. And I mean, for me, I've thrown all that crap away. Nothing do me. But for younger women, it's a huge thing, and even younger men. Safiya, what do we do about this?
I think at this precise moment, you're finding that a lot of people, a lot of young women, Black women and men, they just don't care. They don't care anymore. They've thrown that away. Like you said, they're living by who they are. They are being assertive. They're stepping forward and enjoying who they are. They're living in their truth and not allowing other people to put them down. But for those who don't, I do meet quite a few young women and young men who come to the clinic, and that you can see the fear, the uncomfortableness in their own bodies, even just talking about coming to check themselves out. They're afraid of doing these things. They're afraid of being assertive and being comfortable in who they are. It's about encouragement. It's about you knowing that person who you feel maybe should step out a little bit more out of their shell and become a little more of who they are and who they're supposed to be, and just encouraging them and letting them know that it's okay to be different from what society says that you are supposed to be. Everybody is not the same. Everybody has their own unique personality, their own unique character, and they must learn to really shine in that. It was very hard for me growing up. Obviously, I'm the big girl. I was always told, you need to lose weight, you need to do this, you need to do, there were so many things. And being at a young age, I was very quiet until I turned 18. I didn't really speak out. I was always seen, but never heard. That was definitely a thing that everyone in my family can say about me. I think when I turned 18, I realized that actually, if I don't speak out, no one will hear my voice. No one will know how I feel inside. If I am breaking inside, nobody will know. No one can help me because I'm not speaking out. I'm just doing what I've been taught from a young age to continue doing. And it is not a healthy way to live. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of white people, they are able to speak and be very, be who they are in front of their parents, in front of friends, in front of relatives. In the African tradition, in the Caribbean tradition, we're not allowed to do that. We really aren't. I mean, there are certain topics that maybe we shouldn't join in when our parents or aunties and uncles are speaking. But there are topics where we should be involved and we should be encouraged to speak out. We should be encouraged to get involved and to learn more and to be able to give our opinions. It's extremely important. I encourage my daughter to speak. I encourage her to, if she feels I'm wrong in certain things, like when I tell her off, she'll come to me, "Mommy, I didn't like how you spoke to me. I didn't like the fact that you said it in that way." And I have to sit down and really take a moment, because sometimes it's a shock because I wasn't raised to be that way. And I'm like, okay, her feelings and how she's processing it is important for me to, actually speak to her and explain to her that, okay, I didn't mean it in the way that maybe you're taking it, but I want you to understand why this was wrong for you to do. And I have to apologize. I'm learning to actually say I'm sorry to my daughter, which my mom, sorry was not something that came easily for her to her children. And it's not that she didn't love us, but it was a different way of her showing her love, where she felt like she always had to be the disciplinarian. Sometimes you have to allow, young people, whether they're your children or not your children, to speak out and just be honest, because mental health is a real issue. And it's becoming a very big issue where it comes to sexual abuse, sexual violence, and things like that. People are not speaking out. We have a lot of people coming into our clinic who are, they're white, they come with their parents, and they're able to understand what they need to do. They will sit and ask you, what can I do to help my child? Whereas, in Africa, it seems to be like, if it happens, we want to keep it quiet. We don't really want to let everybody know that this happened to you, or, it was your fault. You dressed in a certain manner, or you went to a certain place that you shouldn't have been. I think it's really important that we encourage and teach from a very young age. That's just mine.
Yeah, I agree with you, but some would say education plays a huge role. So is Fatima there? How do we begin to tackle the education issue? There are laws in place, but we need people to implement the laws. What do we do?
I'm just going to take you back a bit to, I guess, the background of what had happened. Nigeria, in dealing with sexual education, is still very conservative in a lot of ways. In fact, the only times at the inception of trying to create sexual education as a curriculum for schools, there was a lot of pushback that was received both from the media and from subnational levels, which were supposed to be embracing it and trying to see how they could cascade that down to local government levels. But we weren't getting that, because now, again, the rhetoric of traditional and religious values started kicking in. In fact, one of the things that I picked up on was, at the point sometime in 2002, when the first education policy, sexual education policy guideline was being adopted, there was a pushback that was received that basically stalled the whole process from an Islamic cleric and an Anglican bishop in Kaduna. And, it led to basically the watering down of, the contents of the policy. So, at that point, it becomes inadmissible when you have a sexual education guideline that doesn't talk about, for instance, contraception, masturbation, unwanted pregnancies. What are you talking about? Because students at this point need.
So what do we need to do to change it?
Yeah, so I think that some of the things that I feel we can start doing is see how, first of all, we can inculcate that into the teacher's curriculum. Again, we need to go back to the level of training and giving them the right capacity. Because what happens is, this is an INGO, international NGO-driven process. And most of the time, that education is done at the community levels, and they're giving it to traditional rulers who don't necessarily have a platform to transfer that information to the relevant beneficiaries. So I think that it needs to again be inscribed into that through that platform of teachers' education. And then also, I think we need to expand the communication, because there's a lot of young people who are not just in school and can still be targeted. So we need to start creating safe spaces where they can create some level of informal education. Because when we talk about education in Nigeria, it just seems like there's this English manual that has been prepared to go and teach elitist people. And most of the beneficiaries are actually at the local level. And so we need to think about more perceptive, innovative ways of reaching those people. And this again comes back to implementation. At the policy level, we can only go back to review some of those things that we're taking out to water down that policy and see how we can now, update it to current circumstances. But, the absence of a legal framework is always what leads to, people perpetuating what they believe to be the best ways to handle issues. And I hear you, Safia, a lot of things that you were saying, I mean, I could totally resonate with in terms of the style of communication. And that's one thing that we've suffered in Nigeria for the longest time, is how do we communicate with a vast majority of people who don't necessarily belong to an elite class of people who can afford to live above middle class, So again, these things are things that we need to reflect in our laws, and we're working on. Okay, so I'll quickly just give you, if you give me just 2 minutes, the other thing that we're trying to do right now is to work on gender responsive budgeting, because so one of the things that has been missing all this time, whenever we talk about VAP, I bet a lot of people didn't know that it was NAPTIP that was supposed to be implementing it. So everybody still goes back and reverts to Ministry of Foreign Affairs, whereas there's actually a lot of institutions like the police, the judiciary, the Human Rights Commission, the National Orientation Agency, which is supposed to be one of the biggest agencies for advocacy, that are actually not being called out in this space. And so that needs to be addressed. And the only way to do it, so we stop hearing things like, oh, it's because we did not have resources and these things were not added to, the annual budget, that we are not addressing it. We need to create a fiscal innovation and that's what the speaker has been talking about recently, is trying to get partnership so that we can kind of disaggregate all the different relevant multi-sectoral ministries that are supposed to be involved in gender responsive budgeting, so that we can start describing a bigger conversation about gender equality and a bigger debate about gender equality when we're talking in a more meaningful manner through programs and projects, so that we're not just talking and paying lip service whenever there's an issue, but we're actually putting our money where our mouths are. And if we know that this is actually this chunk of money is what has been sent to NAPTIP for investigation and for providing, protection mechanisms for victims of rape or domestic abuse, then you can call out the government meaningfully and say, but this is what was actually sent to this agency, and it's just not sufficient for them to function for a country of over 200 million people. So these are some of the things that we are beginning to hone in on as well. Like, it takes a deeper dive. We've talked to partnering organizations that can provide us with data support and technical support to kind of expand conversation. So again, it's not just ending in, us talking back and forth, but actually now touching areas where we can create a gender perspective in the national policy framework. I'm sorry to take so much time, but thank you so much.
Fatima, we honestly will forgive you the time you've taken if you deliver. We're waiting and looking forward to you to deliver on these things from the inside. From the outside, we will continue the advocacy, but we're looking to the speaker to ensure that a lot of these things, are passed and in that way. I love this question, and because Dame, I'm coming to you, Dr. Babajide. I know that you've been waiting a while, but I really want Dame to take this question, because it's very, and she'll understand when I throw it her way. One of our participants says it's a shame that a lot of Nollywood films glorify rape and SGBV. Perhaps it's high time that sector, which attracts such a huge audience, should change their message. Not sure how this will be done. Before I allow you to answer that question, the other day, I'm on a group of friends, and there was this video where the woman ate the man's chicken, and the man gave her, I think in the process, she bit his finger, and the man gave her such a huge slap. So I said on the group that we shouldn't forward this kind of video. And, a number of people on the group didn't understand what I was saying. I really agree with this participant. When you constantly see something, when we see these Italian movies with these girls, when we constantly see violence, we constantly see rape, we become, numb to it. What do we do, Dame?
Well, that's a very good observation, because I was watching one of the Nollywood movies a few days ago, and I also made the observation that they need to begin to change their narratives in the way they portray their movies, especially with scenes that contain acts of violence and rape. I think it shouldn't be that difficult to carry out a sensitization campaign or engage with the leaders, in the Nollywood industry, the executives of the Nollywood industry, to explain to them that, they need to begin to change the narratives. If you are portraying, for example, a violent scene in a movie, you're only doing that to show that that is wrong, and there are consequences for that act. So, for example, you're not going to have a scene where a woman says something to her husband and he gives her a slap and you leave it at that. You have to take it to the next level by ensuring that he is even arrested, she's taken to a shelter, she's rehabilitated, and then the man begs for forgiveness and promises never to happen again. So these are the kind of things. There should always be, consequences at the end of every violent act, that is played out for whatever reason. So yes, because like you said, when people keep watching things like this, it becomes normal, and a lot of children watch Nollywood movies as well. So when they watch it, it becomes like a normal thing, and it becomes, I tell you a story of a little boy. I think this boy was about 5 years old, and the mother, was having an argument, with the father, and he said, "Don't talk to my father like that unless I'll put my fingers in your eyes, just like Daddy did last time," and because he now thinks that the mother has no right to talk to the father, so you can imagine a 5-year-old growing up to think that that is just the right thing because he sees it all the time, so yeah, I think we can engage the Nollywood executives and they should be able to key into that.
Fantastic. Dr. Babajide, what can we do? Implementation, where we know the laws have, moved, they've gone some way, but what can we do with implementation?
Is that for me?
Yes, that's for you.
Okay, yes, I just want to thank you again. I think as a prosecutor of many years, and you're as good as your investigation file, which you had earlier alluded to. The police needs to up their game in terms of robust and prompt investigation. I mean, look at the example given by Ms. Odeniro earlier about that particular incident in Oshodi. One of the difficulties that we often face that when cases are being reported in a particular police station, the respondent or the family of the perpetrator will go to a higher police formation and get the case transferred away from the local place where the incident happened. And that often leads to compromising the case. And I can tell you, without fear of contradiction, and I'm sure Dame can also attest to this, when cases are not promptly investigated and concluded, it leads to, compromising of the case. So the starting point should have a thorough investigation at the local level where the incident happened. Don't get the case referred to another police formation in order to be compromised. So when you have a well-investigated case file, then you as a prosecutor, then we as law enforcement agents can have a successful prosecution. Without that, there isn't anything anybody can do. It doesn't matter how good you are as an advocate. You are as good as your police investigating officers. Have they gone to the scene? Have they recovered the evidence they're supposed to recover? Have they taken sample from the victim, from the survivor? Have they arrested the perpetrator? Have they taken sample from him to be matched against the sample that have been collected from the survivor? All these things are very, very important in terms of enforcement. So one cannot overemphasize the need to have more specialist police station unit within police station, people who have a good understanding of how to investigate gender-based violence and sexual offenses, and be able to not to be overruled by their superior officer. Because at times you might have a willing, dedicated police officer who is keen to do his best, but you know the way the hierarchy is in the police. When a superior officer says transfer that police file to another, that brings the case to an end.
Yeah. So
and you know, it's quite frustrating.
So sir,
yeah. So one of the things to do
about this police issue, for example, I'm not going to mention any names, but we all heard about the famous singer who the girl accuses him of raping her, and next thing, she's in a police cell, her phone is playing his music, and we're all being shut up, and we're being told that the police can arrest anybody they want. I mean, that made me cry. So what do we do about the police?
I know. Yes. I think basically police are to investigate all cases that have been reported to them, but they need to show empathy for victims of domestic and sexual offense, because it takes a lot of courage and break the culture of silence. It takes a lot of, so you need a lot of sensitivity, responsibility, and empathy on the part of the investigating police officer.
How do we get that to happen?
Yes, we can get that to happen by training and training and training. And also, we need to support the police more in terms of providing logistic. I'm glad Mrs. Kadri is here, who works for the speaker. There is need for more oversight on the funding for the police. Their funding, how is it expended? How is it cascaded down to the local area? When you have a police formation who hasn't got enough money to investigate, that's what will lead to victims being asked to come and support the investigation. And when you ask a victim who 9 out of them don't have economic ability to support your investigation, that will frustrate your effort in investigation. Police need to be well funded, and to have a special dedicated unit within our police formation for officers who have been trained in how to deal with investigation of domestic violence and sexual offenses. I think that's very, very important. And of course, you need a judiciary that is robust, and the time for prosecuting of those cases should be fast track, ideally within 6 months to 9 months. Cases of that nature should go through the courts. You know, I know it might be an utopia because there are some other factors that are beyond the judiciary that cause delay, maybe because of some delay from the IPO being transferred out of the jurisdiction, you know, for non-availability of defendants in court at times, which might not be the fault of the judiciary. But we need a fast-tracking system in order to make sure that cases like this come to court promptly and they are litigated as prompt as possible. Because once you leave it, the victim becomes disenchanted and they are disinclined to go forward and complain because they think there's going to be a war of silence on the part of law enforcement. So all stakeholders need to ensure that we flatten the curve of silence. And the only way to do it as all stakeholders is to put in your best to support the process. And in my office of public defender, that's what we do. We have a toll-free number, 070-80-60-1080, for victims of domestic violence to call us. And anytime they reach out to us, we try to reach out to them and rescue them and send them for medical attention, and also support them through the police investigation. Yeah, 070-80-60-1080 is a toll-free in Lagos State. You know, once you call this number, you don't have to pay. You can anonymously make complaint about domestic violence that you know is happening to somebody. And you can also contact us on our social media platform as well, OPD Lagos. So all stakeholders, it has to be a collaborative effort to stop this scourge of domestic violence and sexual offenses. Thank you.
Yeah, talking about the collaboration, attendees, participants, please continue to put up your questions. This is more of an observation directed to Dr. Makojola, but Dr. Babajide can come in as well. In Nigeria, there's no law regulating forensic science application and enforcement. So shouldn't we focus on passing a law that caters for forensic procedures to bring justice to such sexual assault cases? So if there's no law, Dr. Makojola, what's the process? You're on mute.
Now, okay, so I believe Dr. Babajide Martins can come in with the aspect of law.
Yes.
But
yes, I can come in.
Yeah, so we stress the importance of forensic medical examination. And at the Wari Center, we have trained medical examiners that are on ground to collect samples and evidence that can be taken from the survivors, that can be taken to the DNA forensic lab, which we have established in Lagos now. And that's yes.
So what happens after that, Dr. Babajide, if there's no law? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we were asking you, when Dr. Makojola collects these samples, if there's no law, what happens?
Well, of course, all forensic laboratories, including the one that we have in Lagos, which is with the state-of-the-art technology, they have to have accreditations by international bodies. And our organization, our DNA lab in Lagos, has the highest accreditation that is obtainable in the area of the work they do. So the further allusion is being made that there is no national legislation that governs forensic medicine or forensic practice is not true totally, because for you to have a forensic lab, you need international standard.
We can't hear you anymore. Dr. Makojola, so does that answer your challenge?
Yes. And we, as you stated, we are already working with the Lagos State DNA and Forensic Lab, where samples that we collect at our own center are taken there. And on the other hand, with the police, samples are taken from the perpetrator and taken to the same lab and analyzed. And these are admissible in court as evidence. And it has gone a long way in prosecuting perpetrators of rape and sexual violence.
Fantastic. What I'm going to kind of have each of you tell us in a couple of minutes, what more should we be doing to attack this scourge? I'll start with Dame Julie. What more should we be doing to prevent and address SGBV?
Well, for me, the fight against rape and SGBVs is a fight that should involve the whole of society and the whole of government. Everyone has a role to play. You are playing your part now by coming up with this very brilliant seminar. The press has a role to play, the local governments, the state government. You know, people keep talking about the federal government. No, it doesn't work that way. The state governments, the local governments, the councillors, the women leaders, the Market Women Association, Everyone, the parents, the teachers, everyone has a role to play. So we must play our role. When you see something, you don't just say something, but do something. That's the most important thing. And a lot of awareness is key. Prevention is always better than cure any day. So we need to prevent this by enlightening people, carrying out sensitization campaigns in the local languages, English language, through the town criers in the villages. So everyone has an input in this. We identify the root causes. For example, in the rural communities, we find out that a lot of women or girls are raped when they're going to fetch water. So what do? You put a water in the public square where people can go and fetch water from the taps. So you no longer have to go to the stream to fetch water or take your shower. So identify the root causes, what makes it very prevalent, where it is and how in all of these various places, and attack it, and I believe that if we do that, we'll have a leeway. Thank you.
That's so good. Mrs. Sarah. You're mute. Unmute, please.
What can we actually do? I was actually typing something, is that we need to let people know that once they come to us, our arms are open to receive them. So I get a lot of calls from ladies who have been abused lately and who are still being abused probably in their relationship. I need a form of family planning. So DKT, we will not actually, we refer them to accredited centers, which are actually youth friendly, and whereby they can actually assess it for free counseling. They'll be able to speak up and tell them anything, tell providers anything. As I said, because these providers, we have actually trained them, we're not just referring to any hospital that people will start, stigmatizing them. Oh, you are still young, madam, you are still old, you can't take a method. No, they're actually free. So once they know that they can actually assess, some aspect of health, people will learn to actually speak up and will target a lot of people. So presently it's ongoing in Akwa Ibom, in Abia, River State, 300 vouchers for free for women who need a method of contraceptive. You understand? So that even when they get there, they should feel free to communicate with the health providers. So let them know what they are going through. With that, referrals to can actually come in. Rema.
Fantastic. Dr. Madam Fatima. You're on mute.
Okay, great, thank you. I think we need to do better with letting people know what rights they have with these situations, and then trying to use our existing facilities. I know I know the scenario in Nigeria when we say we are creating like a whole new other kind of institution or kind of like a mechanism to control these things or prevent them. I talk about safe spaces. We can start from just like community meetings, market meetings, in the church, in the mosque, but we need to have people who have the capacity to deliver what is supposed to help people. Also, we need to do better in terms of creating a cohesive mechanism for operation. Because I think that, and one thing we were talking about also is trying to see how we can get a group of response team, which would constitute every arm of government that has a responsibility to actually tackling this scourge. If we have like a work group like that has the mandate of periodically reporting, for instance, to the National Assembly, that is already an accountability mechanism in itself. So when we talk about accountability, that's where we can start from, talking about it consistently and not just allowing things, spring up when there's been 10 girls who have come out to say that they were raped by their headmaster in school, that it becomes an issue and there's protests, So we need to keep our eyes on the ball and be consistent and sustain a conversation that we're able to manage over time.
I agree. Dr. Makodrola, what has been the main pushbacks and the challenges you faced in this fight?
I think most of the pushback we've had is the survivors not having a place where they can report this assault or rape. And a lot of survivors are still not aware that they have a place like Warrior Center where they can get services, where they can talk about their story without being judged or without being shamed. And we need to raise awareness about places like this, like Warrior Center, like SACS, where survivors can get help. And a lot of survivors too are being intimidated, they're being shamed. And we have this mindset in the society where we believe that survivors, or the perpetrators rather, have to present a certain stereotype. You know, it must look like a tout or one armed robber. And so when the survivors come out to talk about how this particular figure in the society assaulted that, you get a lot of pushback from the community, not being believed by the community, and this impression that, oh, she wants to attack the man, she's trying to bring him down, and it's a kind of like a revenge, or people put her up to it. This man is a public figure, is a family man, is a respected member of the society. And so we raise the awareness that anybody can be a perpetrator. These survivors have to be believed. They don't make up the stories. We've had most of the cases of rape and sexual violence that come to the center, they are minors. And so a lot of them, they tell these stories over and over. And it is very painful to hear when you see survivors telling you that they went to make report at the police station, they went to report to their parents, and they were attacked, or they were blamed, or they were made to feel as if they were lying or making up these stories. So we need to believe survivors. We need to support them. We need to encourage them to go to centers like Warrior to get help when cases of rape or sexual assault occur. And we need to take this awareness to schools as well, because a lot of these students, they do not know what rape or sexual assault is all about. They learn it from porn, they learn it from the social media, they learn it from other media places where they shouldn't even get this education. And at Warrior, we have educational initiatives where we go to schools to educate secondary school boys and girls about rape, about sexual assault, how they can report, how they can elicit signs of rape that has occurred to them or even to their peers. And most importantly, we should not downplay this rape and how it affects survivors and their family members. You know, a lot of people come and they say, oh, it happened to you 30 years ago, move on. People don't move on from rape. You can't move on from that. I mean, you shatter this person's life. You can't tell her move on. It happened when you were 5 years old. Why are you bringing it up now? The man is now an important figure in the society. No, we should allow these people a safe space where they can say their story, where they can get help, where they can speak their truth, where they can be believed and supported. I think that will go a long way in encouraging survivors to speak up.
Doctor, that would go such a long way. When I look at the Busola Dakolo case, this is a case where this was not a lone woman. She not only was not alone, there were other women who had reported. Then I watched an interview where another senior person in the Christian community had said that she had had various reports about this man. And then to add insult upon injury, people insinuated she was trying to make money. People insinuated her husband was trying to gain. I mean, what husband wants to gain by coming out and saying his wife was raped? You know, so for me, that case just embodies the challenges in our society. And then to crown it all, this judge speaks, you know, total, you know, I don't even know what to call it. That really concludes it for me and what you're saying. And I tie it back to what Dame said. We all have a voice, a teeny voice, a huge voice, a masculine voice, a feminine voice. We all have a voice, a big voice, a loud voice. Some of us have money voices, some of us have work voices. I can see Sade Ado in the chat, bringing out her voice. I want to be involved in sexual education. Thank you, Sade. Let's all use our voices. And in conclusion, I'm going to ask the male voice amongst us to tell us, what do we do? how do we go forward from here?
Thank you. I think, truthfully, everybody has really hit the nail on the head with all the different points. And I guess the only thing I would say is, in order to break the stigma that's seen around this topic of sexual gender-based violence, this conversations like this need to be had more. I love what Fatima said earlier about consistency, because something, a man up, something we've noted is, I remember in 2018, something similar happened and everybody was talking about sexual assault and rape, and it was a massive thing on social media, and then it died out. And then another situation came up, and it always is something big happens and then we talk about it. Something big happens and then we talk about it. And it's important for us to keep this thing consistent. Let it not just be something we talk about for a month or 2 months, or let it not be a trend. That's one of the things I hate about social media now, just the idea of trends. But let it not be a trend. Let it be something that is actually ingrained in us and ingrained in our daily thinking almost, that we are able to identify where, the red flags and be like, actually, I shouldn't allow that to happen. Or actually, yeah, do you understand what I'm saying? And I think that from a, on a perspective, from a point of view of how men can help, I mean, I've kind of looked through the attendees, and again, not too many men. I think that is something we should all try and have that discussion in our small friendship groups, because you never know how far it can go. Have the discussion with men on purpose, consciously, intentionally. Ask them how their mental health is. Ask, the questions that hits deep, not because a lot of guys, a lot of times we gather and we're just talking about football or something, or we're talking about video games or whatever it is, but guys are not encouraged to go deep and look inward. And that's one thing that I feel like once we change that, once we are able to, as men, once we're able to look inward and have that point of view and that perspective, we're going to be able to be more empathetic, and we're going to be able to think about other people's, think about situations from other people's shoes. So take ourselves out of our shoes and say, okay, I shouldn't do this to this person simply because I'm horny and I want to, get whatever I want, but I shouldn't do this to this person because it's bad and it will make this person feel a type of way. I feel like, I always, ever since I heard this, I always bring it up that Beyonce said, she was giving a speech for graduating class of 2020, and she was like, let's tap into our vulnerability to redefine masculinity. And ever since she said that, I've just been like, it's so true, because it really is a key that unlocks us as men, a deep part of us that we don't know we have. And if I was to say anything that we can do, it would be that.
Thank you so much. I have one question from the participants. Can the statutory bodies and organizations work with schools to develop an ambassador scheme? And I'm going to throw that back to Fatima and Dr. Mark Ojola to please get together and continue this conversation. I was given credit by somebody, I think it was by Dave, for putting this together. I take it, I chop it, and I promptly hand it back over to who it belongs to. The Public Health Hub has done an amazing job of putting this conversation together. I have learned so much. The auntie-uncle thing, I mean, my grandchildren, if I have any, will not be calling anybody uncle and auntie, and so much more what the government is doing. Thank you so much. I will be handing back to the Public Health Hub. Before I do that, I want to say a huge thank you for our panelists. There were quite a few of us. You've been very patient. Dame Julie Okadonli, you were supposed to leave at 3 for staying to the end. We thank you. We honor you. We're grateful. I think Dr. Babajide had to slip off, as well as Mrs. Safia Lanti. Thank you so much. Mrs. Sarah Deniron, it was wonderful having you. Mr. Temida Seriki, let's continue to man up. Dr. Makojola, keep the great work going. And Fatima Kakuri, please keep whispering into the ears of the politicians into the speaker's ears about what needs to be done. And that's from me, Abby Longe. I can be reached on abby@abbylonge.com. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Mojoy at the Public Health Hub. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Longe. You really brought this conversation to life. I want to thank every single panelist. Oh, Mrs. Donnelly had to slip off before I could thank her. This is what we stand for, and this is what we do. We are here to bring collective minds together because we believe in cross-panel and development and education. We need to come together in different sectors of the health sector, the community, the police, to make our voices heard. And to everyone that's a victim that's listening, your story is your power. Do not let your power be diminished by the society that we are in, the patriarchal society that we are in. We are here for you at the Public Health Hub. Warrior of Nigeria is here for you. Primary healthcare centers and organizations like Mrs. Sarah Denner works in are here for you. We are trying to create safe spaces where you feel welcome and feel heard. Thank you so much. If you want to reach us, you can reach us on our website or on our Instagram page. And this is enough from us.
And just before we go, we're going to be publishing the recording on YouTube and on our Instagram page. So if you want to share with anyone, please check our pages and do share, because the conversation doesn't end here and we want to get this message out to as many people as possible.
Please tell your friends, share this around. It's going to be recorded and uploaded on our YouTube page. The fight has just begun. We have so much more in store for everyone. Thank you again and have a great afternoon.
Thank you
guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.